Hey everyone! How we all feeling about Blizzard Entertainment? Perfect, because it's time for another episode of What Happened, the show where we dig deep into the depressing debacles of disdainful disgraces. So this will be perfect for Blizzard! And when you talk about the company named after a weather pattern that's owned by Activision and China, you can't help but bring up one of, if not their biggest failure, their inability to ship a single game on the 6th generation of consoles. That being, of course, the PlayStation double balling, the Xbox, no not that Xbox, and Nintendo's stinky Melee machine. This is the story of Blizzard's phantom game, the intangible, barely existing StarCraft Ghost. Thanks again to those of you who support me on the Flophouse VIP Patreon for voting on this game into the winning slot this week, and thank you to the exact same amount of people who also voted for Brink. I'm doing both. It'll be the next episode, I swear to God. Anyway, let's rewind back to 1998, which was, yeah, a pretty good year for video games, I think. In the PC space specifically, StarCraft was more than dominating, cementing Blizzard's already great reputation and bringing the RTS firmly into the mainstream. Aside from the truly ambitious and charming port of StarCraft to the Nintendo 64 and Diablo for the PlayStation 1, Blizzard wanted to slide into the console space with the shoulder touch.
Hey.
At the time, however, they were more than busy with things like Diablo 2 and Warcraft 3 just starting development, and that weird adventure game they cancelled.
Who are you?
My name would mean nothing to you. But yours means much to me, Hellscream.
And you've come to claim the reward. I like your spirit, whelp.
To help them accomplish this, Blizzard sought out a third party to help them spin off their hottest IP into a console game. Then fired them, then hired someone else, then got bored, and then never released the game. Nihilistic Software were largely made up of ex-LucasArts employees, most of them having worked on Jedi Knight, and their first release was Vampire the Masquerade Redemption, which, largely gets overshadowed by Bloodlines, but the game nonetheless impressed Blizzard, more than likely because it was clearly modeled after Diablo. Rob Huebner, who produced Ghost on the Nihilistic side, said in an interview with Polygon, link in the description below, that the idea of expanding the StarCraft universe with a spin-off game formed very fast and was also greatly influenced by the then exploding stealth genre. The first direction was about that question, what if you were in the middle of a StarCraft battle? Also, Metal Gear Solid was out, Splinter Cell wasn't too far away, so we felt like it was going to be a good fit. Why it was a good fit was because the player would be controlling the Slinky Nova, a ghost unit on the Terran side of the StarCraft conflict. Within months, Nihilistic had basic builds up and running and were regularly reporting to Blizzard, and with a wealth of talent available in both camps, ideas for Nova's adventure were never in short supply. Nihilistic were doing the heavy lifting with the programming and the art, while Blizzard would provide constant feedback and help guide the design, and would of course provide the CG cinematics. A solid enough plan, and unlike most of, if not 100% of other What Happened fodder, Blizzard gave Nihilistic no set deadline, no looming release date, simply feeling that when the game is ready and enough iteration was done, it would eventually be released. Blizzard knew it was an iterative project, and the whole success over there had been about taking their time. It was like, every month we'll pay you and you give us what we ask for. It was too good to be true, and we thought it was the best thing ever. It provided us security for the team and gave us time to ramp up, but the dark side was that it kept going and going and going. It could be trying to work on something for a long time and not see it shipped. Nihilistic employees described this period working on Ghost as fun and exciting. Nova was very slick to control and everything already felt pretty solid, even letting players call down nuclear strikes into throngs of enemies, much like her RTS counterparts.
You called down the thunder. Now reap the whirlwind.
The game's story, however, was a point of contention, with it being revised several times over, with the most being known about it is the incredibly generic Nova goes on a planet-spanning journey that involves a conflict between all three of StarCraft's races. That which was affecting the story, the lax time frame and the luxury of being able to reiterate, started to affect other areas, with significant chunks of the game's spine still missing. Nihilistic would often spend weeks in long debates about the game's design, as a divide was starting to form about Ghost's pacing and combat focus. In 2002, the world was given the first look at Nova at the Tokyo Game Show, fully playable, and despite it being early, the excitement was palpable. Nihilistic, however, were still a long ways from shipping it. Blizzard's feedback at this time still revolved around adding new features and experimenting with the game rather than polishing what they had. Ghost played well, it just wasn't very cohesive, a few loosely connected missions that lacked consistency and a story. By this time, however, Splinter Cell was an established franchise, and the Ghost team started to get feedback from Blizzard suggesting they lift features from these other series. That divide over the game's tempo I mentioned earlier was that half of Nihilistic felt the game should be more action-orientated, as did Blizzard, while the other half of Nihilistic and their higher-ups wanted to stay on the stealth brief that was the initial plan. What's worse is that the game would often suffer through a revolving door of Blizzard producers, going through several of them rather than have one constant vision guiding the project. This made Nihilistic feel that Ghost was no longer a priority for the company. I can't imagine why. Former Blizzard bigwig Bill Roper recalls, "Then it came full circle. Ghost started as stealth, then it felt like it had too much action. Then they needed more stealth, and then what about multiplayer? It became so rough. The Nihilistic team was killing themselves working. During presentations, you'd get a Metal Gear Solid coming out, then a Halo." Roper went on to say that Nihilistic were simply doing what Blizzard had instructed week after week, but they could never seem to strike that balance of action versus stealth. This was further complicated by Blizzard's infamous strike teams, basically clusters of employees assigned to give feedback on projects the company was developing, even if they had absolutely nothing to do with said projects. With the team having sunk over 3 years into the game by now, Hubner felt frustration boiling at the surface, as Blizzard would spend valuable time giving feedback on things in this phase of development weren't exactly important at all. I remember we had a lot of fights about the design of a Marine's boot. To give the project more guidance, Blizzard hired an outside consultant who eventually settled into more of a producing role. That consultant would be none other than DJ and Weapon Lord creator James D. James Goddard. Since his background was more in the realm of fighters and action games, Goddard decided to take a stand and tried to push the game in more of an action flavor, recognizing they needed to choose a direction and stick with it. That was the identity problem. I pushed the idea at the end of the day that it was a stealth game, but it's not a hardcore stealth game. I think people really struggled with that. This would prove to be a sticking point all the way up to the game's cancellation. I mean its indefinite hold in development. By 2004, Rob Hubner decided to sign a contract with EA to produce some new games, in anticipation/assumption that Ghost would finally ship that year. We thought that if we can't buckle down and finish by a certain date, then development would cease. I don't know if we ever said that explicitly, but I think both sides knew. It was not a shippable, super polished game by Blizzard's standards, but there were glimmers that were really fun. A really good stealth level, a Zerg level, a stealth-heavy Protoss level, and a Protoss ship, but they all played like different games. At E3 2004, StarCraft Ghost once again was made available to the public, but both Blizzard and Nihilistic took that weekend to discuss the game's fate. The meeting didn't go well. While not outright said, both sides felt like the game had been spinning its wheels for far too long, and with the upcoming contract from EA gearing up, Nihilistic wouldn't have much more time to finish, especially with the amount that still needed to be done. Eventually, the decision to can the whole thing came down, and Hubner was not looking forward to telling his team the bad news. 3 years of work all for nothing. I don't think Blizzard ever quite knew what they wanted. It was heartbreaking, particularly for the artists. They made tons of work that they can't show. I remember one guy cried and went home. It was traumatic for some people. You try not to think about it and move on. That was definitely a short day. Fortunately, due to the particulars of the contract with Blizzard, Nihilistic were paid every single month, regardless of Ghost never shipping. They also used the tech and what they learned on Ghost to make their future projects, of which we will speak of later. Their flirtation with the StarCraft universe behind them, Nihilistic assumed that Nova's adventures in Ghost were over.
The dream was over. Coming up, was the dream really over? Yes, it was. Or was it?
Almost immediately, Blizzard hired Swinging Ape Studios to pick up on Ghost's development, feeling the game could still be salvaged. Scrapping almost all of what Nihilistic had done, and with the new brief of pushing the game squarely towards action, Swinging Ape had impressed Blizzard with their first title, the underrated Metal Arms glitch in the system. Within just a few months of having this more focused direction, and with the relationship going so well, Blizzard even outright purchased Swinging Ape the very next year. They then even transplanted Swinging Ape Studios directly into their own California headquarters to facilitate more direct feedback and to speed the whole process up. While Nihilistic had started a basic form of multiplayer, they never made much headway on it, especially since half the team was against its inclusion from the start. Under Swinging Ape, however, players were directly controlling firebat units and dousing Zerglings in plumes of flame at the game's very next playable appearance at BlizzCon 2005. The feedback from players at the show was fantastic, and a brand new cinematic was shown, so it seemed like there was finally light at the end of the tunnel. James Goddard was still on the project with Swinging Ape, and was really happy with what the team brought to the table. Swinging Ape did a really good job, and the game was really going somewhere and just really impressive. The gameplay was good, the shooting was good, and when they got multiplayer working and you're playing multi-console and jumping on speeders, that was just holy shit. This didn't last, as you can imagine. Feedback from Blizzard began to slow considerably at this juncture, which was mainly due to one reason: upkeep and continued development for World of Warcraft, which was then kind of a big deal.
Dad!
Dad? Not now!
Blizzard were therefore all hands on deck for their online money-making machine, which left them little time to focus on poor old Nova. Eventually, however, both Swinging Ape and Blizzard had come to realize something. They had missed the entire 6th generation. By the end of 2005, the Xbox 360 was already out, and the PS3 would be the following year. Logically, upper management were concerned that Ghost would look outdated by the time it would finally hit stores. Coupled with the company's laser focus on WoW and the amount of time and resources it would take to port, it was decided to simply axe the whole thing. Swinging Ape Studios was dissolved, with many of the team members finding work elsewhere within the labyrinth-like halls of Blizzard. As for Nihilistic, well, that multi-game contract they had signed with EA wasn't so multi-game, as it resulted in the singular release of Marvel Nemesis: Rise of the Very Imperfects. Due to the game's lackluster sales and critical reception, Nihilistic did not continue their relationship with EA and moved on to the greener pastures of Conan on next-gen systems, before concluding their development history with the disastrous Call of Duty Declassified for the PlayStation Vita, a project they were given a raw deal over. Activision had only given them 6 months to complete the whole game, and despite the game being dragged over coals critically and spectacularly failing to save the Vita, it's still impressive they even got it running in that time frame at all. Rob Hubner, however, holds no ill will towards Blizzard for Ghost's troubled development. The project had its problems from the very start, and Blizzard wasn't set up as a publishing company, but they have their own culture. and they had to kind of break through that cultural barrier. As for me, well, I'm no fan of working with external developers either. James Goddard laments the game's cancellation, and the fact fans will likely never play a finished version. I think if it had come out, it would have been awesome, just awesome. If they wanted to do it now on current systems, and if they could get past that identity crisis, I'd love to see it happen.
Mission terminated. This is Nova, signing off.
If you're aware of any other mortifying maelstroms of morality, let me know in the comments below. I'm doing Brink next. I swear an 8-pound, 3-ounce baby Jesus' head. Let me know in the comments below, or stealthily sneak your way into the Flophouse VIP Patreon to take part in our official polls, or directly nominate your own episode of what happened you'd like to see me take down next. See you next time, and thanks for watching.